So, Star Savior has been out for more than a week as of this time of recording, and this single topic has been my most requested content ever since its launch. How do you do a good journey in Star Savior? Hey guys, MrPokke here, and if this is your first time playing a game like SS or even Uma Musume, you might be overwhelmed by the complexity of this training system. So today, we will be going through a complete in-depth look as to how do you get a good journey run in Star Savior, discussing the training options, when to do commissions, how is the hard journey like, what gears to pick, how to spend potential points, when do you focus on training and rest, what are the important events, and hopefully you can also start farming good stellar archives once you eventually reach hard mode. So without further ado, let's get into today's content. So as of this current moment, I've pretty much done more than 100 runs of journey within the Star Savior global version, many of which is going to be done mostly around the A+ to S ranking category. And as of this moment, I'm personally just trying to farm out a little bit of parents as I work towards my resonance levels. So I would say I'm relatively qualified to get you guys through the complete understanding of how do you get a good journey run for all of your own saviors. So the very first thing to know for a new player is your easy and even medium journeys will be vastly different compared to your hard mode. It is going to be an entirely different gameplay due to the brand new Trajectories system, which just got introduced last month in KL and JP. For today, we'll be focusing mainly on the early game mechanic to get a basic understanding, then focusing on hard mode as that will be exclusively where everyone will be farming once you get into 18-36. If I have to put a timeline as a free-to-play, you'll probably spend the first 2 to 3 days doing easy, medium for about 2 to 3 weeks, and the hard mode for the rest of all of your journey in Star Savior. So the information you guys learned today throughout easy and medium, it will also apply to hard, but just with a different set of stat requirements as well as Arcana decks, so you should get a gist of it fairly quickly. So regarding the basics of Star Savior's journey, it is going to be a lot more simplistic with lesser RNG elements compared to Uma Musume, on top of adding an auto-clear system, which should only be used to farm for parents. With the added quality of life like skip buttons, less punishing events, guaranteed SSR Arcana events, this drastically reduces the time it takes to get a good save file and progress through the content in Star Savior. To start off, the first and most important thing for any good journey will start from your resonance level, which you can get by leveling up and unlocking them as your time progresses with your level gate. So this is going to be what determines your stats you see at the left of your screen. The higher the base level for your resonance, the easier it is to clear the journey, especially at the start of the game when you go into hard mode. Now, as you can see over here, while they might be coming from 2 different characters, namely Wild's Asha as well as a Haiti, a difference between a level 8 resonance as well as a level 6 resonance can be absolutely absurd. So just like Uma Musume's training event as well as the major races you want to complete, you want stats to make sure to win your trial races as well as events so that you can proceed onto the game, with resonance being the first big determinant of how strong or weak of a start as you are going to be starting with, as the stats provided in this run are absolutely substantial. A good estimate as to whether or not you can clear the journeys easily is going to be Resonance 6 for general medium clears as well as Resonance 8 for general hard level clears. For some units, they might have an easier or harder time depending on their unique items, but generally this is going to be a very good benchmark. Now, although the next step into selecting your journey after you select your character with the resonance, it is going to show you your 2 parents, but I want to save the parent stage after this portion first because your Arcana decks are actually going to be determining how you are going to be running your runs for both parents as well as Ace Saviors. So for the Arcana specifically, please refer to your Arcana tier list over here as well as an explanation on how they work, so I won't go into the cards here since this is going to be a journey guide. Due to a lack of a substitute for most SSR Arcana effects, players might be wondering how deck building works since there's no way to get a specific skill. But this issue will eventually fix itself purely from the number of pools the game gives you over time. Now, what's more important than having every single tier 0 or tier 0.5 Arcana is going to be the deck building philosophy for each unit, namely attack scalers as well as HP scalers, which will allow you to have a much better understanding of the game itself and see why it's not the end of the world just because you do not have every single specific card. So splitting into 3 main categories, we do have the attack DPS, HV DPS, as well as pure tanks. You can refer to this little table over here to see which kind of deck building structure you're going to be following for most of your runs. Now, on top of this, there are also 2 types of decks between each classes, namely your Ace and Parent runs, with the key difference being Parent decks are more focused on standard potentials, while Aces are focused on more unique potentials. We'll be talking about Parent farming later in the portion, so for now, just stick to your understanding for the Arcana decks. So for some of the common substitutes for players without Petra, you can either use the Battle Pass Arcana or 1 more power card for attack DPS or 1 more HP or defense card for HP and tanks, or you can just use a flex card like a unique Arcana. Now for players without Charlotte, which is gonna give you the stigmata of speed, it is okay to run any card in that slot that fits your archetype, just like the Leg of Petra, though Charlotte is gonna be farmable from Flashpoint, so you will eventually have yourself the Charlotte Arcana. For the flex slots, it will usually depend on the build and effect for each unit. So if you are going to be running Assassins, for example, Kira's 30 speed buff will be extremely strong, or Hilde's preemptive guard for defenders, or Muro's 30% crit damage to casters, etc, etc. The general rule for deck building during medium and eventually hard is to always run 3 of the stat you want to hit 750 and 1250 respectively. So for any attack DPS, it's going to be 3 power, while any HP DPS or HP tank is going to be 3 vitality or HP cards. Now, while Hayley is going to be a defense-based unit, she will still want HP training as HP directly boosts your defense, as well as increasing your overall HP when she's going to be having the 30% damage split. So now that you have leveled your resonance, as well as knowing what decks to use roughly speaking, this is where it gets pretty good as you can introduce 2 different parent saviors to help you on your journey. Now, they are gonna be almost the same as Uma Musume parents, except a lot more simplified due to the following reasons. Number 1, there are no such thing as grandparents. Number 2, the mains that you obtain are always gonna be fixed. And number 3, which is perhaps the most important point of all, you can farm parents completely automatically with the skip ticket, taking you roughly less than 1 minute to get a single parent run. While the white sparks you get or the standard potentials might be RNG whether you get a discount or not, the variance between each run with whether your parents will give you a good blessing is going to be drastically lower compared to a game such as Uma, which is gonna be the best comparison. To keep it simple, you train parents in Star Savior via the auto function and train Ace Saviors manually for the best possible stats. Now the reason being parents runs are very easy once you can consistently clear towards the end of the journey in either medium or hard mode, and you don't even have to complete the full run as long as your stats are ideally 750 in medium and more than 1000 in hard mode for the specific stat you are going to be training for. So the end product of a parent run will look something like some of these screenshots over here, where you get more than 30 on a single stat, which is usually going to be either strength or vitality, and the stats that actually go up to 45 or even 50 is mainly going to be obtained from your hard mode. And on top of that, if you get a couple of multiple standard potentials like the one seen from Welt's Ashira, then it's going to be giving you a little bit more chance to get those in the discount for your ace run. To train for parents, you simply slam all in for a single stat, skip, and pray for the RNG rolling for the stat you're going to be wanting with a high roll. So those additional skills are even better, but the goal is to aim for at least a 30 plus main stat roll on either vitality or power. This will be the foundation of your hard journey, and it will make it infinitely easier to get through your hard mode later on, which you can actually start a process even through farming parents in medium. So the reason why 30 plus stat is going to be so important, because as mentioned previously, all parents main stat inherits are guaranteed thrice in the entire run. Once in the selection screen, once before the start of the first outfield, and once before the second outfield. So if you have 30 stats on 2 different parents, that's gonna be 180 stats, which is easily equivalent to 2 or even 3 turns of stats from training. Only after you have a 30 plus parent should you consider a hard journey on top of having a Resonance 8 level. So before you achieve this, simply slam a few runs in auto until you obtain the desired main stat. I would not be greedy for multiple standard potentials, as those are much harder if you're still going to be looking for 30 plus main stats, on top of your hard journey being an easier place to farm for standard potentials in the first place because you will have more potential points for hard journeys. For standard potentials, look for these 3 keywords: sense, skill, and talent, which is what determines your flex slot in the parent deck. These are the only inheritable skills which are seen from them not having a unique icon, unlike SSR uniques, none of which can be inherited. For a sense, skill, and talent, prioritize speed over crit over attack or HP. So some examples of good parents cards notably are gonna be for their standard potentials, such as Bunny Charlotte, the upcoming Rosaria, Bunny Scarlet, Bunny Claire, as well as Welt's Ashira. Both of which are gonna be having a lot of skills as well as talents to give you additional stats for your characters. So once you sort out your resonance, your parents, and Arcana, it is finally time to get into the journey itself. So at this point, you might be wondering, do you start doing medium or hard, or rather, when do you actually start progressing into the hard journey? Because even though you might unlock it at chapter 18-36, your characters might not have enough strength to actually get through the hard journey itself, which is one of the biggest problems that a lot of global players are facing. So I'm personally going to be skipping over the easy mode because most players by now would have already passed it, and if you're going to be a brand new player watching this guide, just simply refer to our medium section, and it's pretty much going to be the exact same. So since most players will be pushing for 1836 to unlock hard, but despite unlocking it, I highly recommend not going to do hard at least until level 160 for your units, which will unlock your Resonance 8. And later on, when you unlock level 180 for 4 different units, this will give you Resonance 9 to make the career as smooth as possible while taking on more difficult tasks. Also, consider the prerequisite of having good parents and good Arcana decks, so ideally you fulfill all 3 requirements for Resonance, Arcanas, as well as parents. If you cannot fulfill these 3 requirements, then they are going to be a lot more lenient in medium mode, so do farm there for your few ace runs first or even parents, since a bad hard run is almost no different from an average medium run. Now the key difference for hard mode is that besides the additional 1250 stat limit, harder fights and more potential points, it is also going to be the introduction of a trajectory system, which I'm going to be saving for the end of this video. So for this portion, I will just be discussing the journey basics to give you guys a basic understanding of how everything works, and all of this knowledge can be applied to any game mode within the journey. Now there is one thing, which is some players have actually suggested slamming resets for 3 different units and all in your resources for a single unit just to unlock a higher resonance and therefore start farming for your hard difficulty. However, this artificial inflation will require constant resets multiple times, and I would not recommend it, especially for free to plays. Your unlocked resonance at a higher level will return back to being locked once you reset again. So personally, I would just stick to your traditional level progression until you eventually hit them naturally. So now that we have come to the actual journey itself, your objective is relatively simple. Raise the main stats you want to the highest possible level and get as many potential points, or I'm just going to be calling them as PPs, by the end of the run to upgrade more skills. So for Starsavior's journey, it will be split into 3 main phases across 45 turns. Aganon at turn 15, Flora or Caleb for strength or HP training at turn 30, and the Void Trials/finals towards the end. I will just be naming them as early, mid, and late progressions for simplicity, and this will hold true for any journey difficulty. Now, unlike an UMA 3-year journey, Starsavior is only going to be 1 year, but since each month has 3 phases, and every single journey will have the exact same checkpoints, especially when you go to the different cities. For each journey, every savior will also have their unique items to help them with the progress, since no gears, which is going to be your relics, can be used in the journey itself. As a result, some of your saviors will have an easier journey than others, but don't worry about it, as all saviors can clear medium and later hard difficulty with good enough resonance, parents, and arcanas. Now regarding the key event checkpoints for each stage of the month, fixed events with stat checks during your 2 different town visits are always going to be there, added with some random encounters you'll be facing on NPCs across the run. If you do hit these stat checks, you can get a decent amount of stats, so try to aim for them based on this table I've made for you guys right here. Regarding mid-July, late November, as well as early December events, you can go for the ancient coin option, as they reward stamina, which is going to be your energy or your food, but less potential points. For the early August event, it gives a 20% sense of speed discount, which can save you a lot of potential points if you're going to be trying to build a fast unit. For the mid-November event, both of them give PPs, with the second one giving more to the main stat, though the first option stat check is going to be easier to hit. For every single one of these events during the journey, as well as your random SSR Arcana events, they can also be tracked in this website right here, so feel free to take a look and adjust to your decks to pick the right option every single time. Now regarding the quest or the commission, for the entire run, you will only do quests when a hunt quest is up, which is gonna be happening 3 times in the run, 1 turn before the actual trial fight before progressing towards the next stage. They will give you ancient coins to spend for rest and food, items for potential and ease of journey, as well as the occasional food, mood, as well as stat buffs. Now regarding the difficulty of the actual hunt itself, ideally you never ever take a fight more than 4 ranks higher than your current rank, as the rank difficulty scales exponentially, making the enemies hit you harder and you not dealing enough damage. You can try to cheese some of these difficulties with units and artifacts like abusing poison or bleed, but it is still very difficult and they usually require a manual gameplay. Personally, it is not going to be worth the very minor ancient coin increase as well as the risk of failure, so stick to at least within your level where it doesn't say hard. Now during the actual run itself, the training methodology is relatively similar across all 3 stages, so I'll just be giving you guys the important tips which you can apply at any point of the run. For your items, most attack units will always take the leftmost items, your HP unit takes the middle, and the right item is usually going to be neutral. For tanks or the ones taking the middle, they inherently will have an easier journey than the DPS because no gears can be used, and most runs will end early to mid journey as you cannot sustain yourself. Always pay the gold item, as all items are refunded at the end of the run to give you potential points, so you can get more PPs if you always pay the gold item, which will give you an additional 12 PPs instead of 8 PPs. Another thing to note is that you do want to get your friendship early on, but you ideally never ever train focus and protection at all in starsavior, because a single turn there will result in you losing training experience levels for your strength, vitality, and endurance trainings despite the slight stamina recovery. And it is often never worth it unless you have absolutely no one in other trainings on top of 3 or above in focus or protection. Hence, for the entire early portion, focus on friendship and ideally more on either STR or vitality, depending if you're going to be training an attack or HP based unit. Regarding rest, pick an early 30 gold rest for 1 mood up guaranteed and hope for a great success, which is 2 mood ups as well as 50 stamina. During later stages, ideally you want to train until the 60 gold option gives you a good value, so you have to gamble roughly a 10% rate of failure. But if you want to play it safe, then stick to the 30 gold options, although you could go for the free rest. However, going for the free rest has a chance of a random stat debuff, which can be really bad if it lands on the main stat you're training for. Now, it is very important that you hit your orange friendship for your main cards, which is going to be 3 STR or 3 vitality as quickly as possible. Almost always before the second town, as their effects compound with one another as super sensory training or the rainbow training, leading to insane turns like the ones shown over here. Another thing to note is to always play around your Arcana events, because every single event from your SSR Arcanas are guaranteed triggers. It just depends on at which part of the journey. Now, this is going to be important for Arcanas that gives you free stamina like Lacey and Charlotte, so if you know those Arcanas have not arrived early on, then later on they will definitely trigger, so be sure to save some space for the extra stamina. Now, when the run is finally complete and you're going to be picking up your potentials, think if your run was a good run or a bad run. If the run could have been better, skip every single unique skill, which is going to be the gold highlight at the left side with a shine effect, and only focus on sense, skill, and talent for a parent potential run. If this run is actually going to be satisfactory, then pick all the uniques first before thinking about others, with the priority once again being speed over crit over your attack traces. So with all that being said and done, this is going to be the part where I'll be introducing to you guys the trajectory system, which is going to be exclusive for your hard journeys. This is going to be a brand new feature added on hard mode that grants a customizable special potential at the end of the run, depending on what option you pick at the start as well as in the middle of the journey. This is going to be an incredibly strong potential that is pretty much a must pick for any ace runs in hard training, ranging from crit rate, speed, HP, attacks, as well as many others. So to understand how this system works, at the very start of your run, you can see that you are given 3 options: a training manual for offense, survival, as well as various situations. You can refer to this little chart over here to unlock which of these do you always want to proceed with during the run itself. So if you want to go for an AX5 or an AX4, you will always pick the offense. And if you want to go for DX, which is going to be your speed boost, you're always going to pick your survival, etc, etc. After you pick the very first option, this is also why you always want to do your hunt commissions at the start of every single journey. Because after every single successful hunt, you are going to be visited by the Polaris Observer, which will give you a random 3 different items for you to mix and match for the final potential. The items you pick here will slightly increase the probability of getting the combo you want at the end, but this is not going to be guaranteed. So for example, if I were to pick the crit rate New Apocalypse head right here, then there's a higher likelihood that I'm going to be getting my AX5 because this is going to be a crit rate buff overall. For more details, you can check out this site once again to show you guys exactly what each of these relics are going to be doing for you in the run itself. Now, I will not be talking about the best in stock trajectories, as they are still going to be RNG at the end, despite having increased probabilities based on what you pick between your hunt quests. So refer to our all unit guide for more information to get a rough understanding of what you want to pick for your trajectories. Generally speaking, attack DPS will always run an AX set, which is going to be the gloves for your stacking attack percentage. For HP units, they will usually always run a BX set, which is going to be for HP and recovery, and for units want extremely fast speed, then you will be running the DX shoes for the highest possible speed. There might be some rare cases like pseudo DPS and tanks that can run an EX head for additional crit rate, but generally speaking, your option 3 will almost never be picked because their effects are very niche. Now, this is gonna be the last part of our journey guide, which is a higher rating always gonna be good, or how do you determine if the actual journey has been a good run for your ace saviors? Once everything is done, in summary, no, because for starsavior, they weight the stats differently, but you could actually deal more damage for different cases. So for example, your HP units like Emily as well as Ashura, they actually deal more damage if you were to do more power training, but the game recognizes power as a lower priority. Instead, they want to focus them on vitality as well as endurance instead. So while you might have a lower rating, you could actually still deal higher damage in the actual run itself. With that being said, in the early game when you actually start playing starsavior, you would want to aim for higher ratings to inflate your CP and reduce your CP gap as much as possible, because it is going to be based on a ratio. In the late game, you can go for lower CP and ratings, but having higher actual damage because the CP gap ratio is going to be less impacted by your raw numbers. So you can think of it as this way. 10% of a 10,000 CP versus 10% of a 100,000 CP. If you improve 1,000 CP in the early game of 10,000, there's gonna be a 10% jump between your CP gap, which is gonna be very, very substantial, making you clear things a lot easier. However, later on, if you reduce 1,000 CP at 100,000, then it is only gonna be a 1% drop. So this is gonna be a worried trade-off, especially if you're gonna be dealing way more damage. So at this part of the video, I pretty much went through everything you guys need to know when it comes to journey in starsavior, and I will also be doing a full run live demonstration later on just to show you guys exactly step by step and following what exactly you need to do for a hard journey. Let me know what you guys think. If you have any comments down below, feel free to join our streams or catch our Discord, and you can discuss with a lot of like-minded starsavior friends, right? With that, we've come to the end of today's content. All the best for our gacha pools. Use code POKE with 10% off gamer subs, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.